Today, I'll be interviewing Dr. Allison Gainer, who is a recent doctoral graduate from Rowan University. She is a higher education leader, counselor, and champion for disability access and inclusion. Recently, her graduation has been highlighted online and even covered in an article by USA Today. In addition to her stellar work, her service dog, Lily-Rue, walked across the stage with her and received an honorary degree for loyal service. Today, I want to highlight your experiences as someone in higher education with a service dog. So thank you so much for letting me interview you today.
Yes, of course. Thank you for having me.
So my first question, of course, as somebody who's really interested in research, what was your doctoral research on?
So my main focus was disability and accommodations within the higher education realm. I feel like it's something talked about a lot, but then I wanted to specifically look into ways that we can better support students with disabilities to create more inclusive learning, environments. While it might be specifically service dogs, and animals, I like to say and animals because you never know, a miniature horse might come through. I wanted to better understand how institutional practices and the faculty awareness on top of either disability or accessibility services really impacted students' experiences. Because I think when we enter college, I kind of had the idea that everybody knew policy and procedure. Everybody was smart enough to figure it out. You hear about creation and innovation and equity, but yet for some reason, it doesn't seem to work out that way. So my goal wasn't just to identify these challenges, but it was to find ways that higher education can better serve the students versus like, hey, so we have a policy for that. We're not really sure if it works, but hey, we have it. And that, these opportunities for students continue to be equitable, because I think people are starting to realize that disabilities aren't just a set of like A, B, and C. It looks different. They are different. So I'm kind of trying to be more proactive versus, reactive.
That's really interesting. Were there any policies that stood out to you that you learned more along the way on, or any lasting impact change that you feel that came about from this research, or impactful change that you think will occur because of the research?
I guess I wasn't aware of how often disabled individuals are left out of these conversations. People really do not understand what disability looks like. So when the policy was created, for example, for service animals, a lot of my colleagues were under the impression that, disabled plus dog equals blind. So to them, a blind student or someone who's vision impaired would not maybe be in a lab scenario, in which I told them disability is a spectrum. Blindness is a spectrum. There are a lot of different reasons as to why people might need a certain accommodation, such as a service dog. So to make that assumption that, their lab would never frequent a student with a disability is something I first had to paint the picture of. And then another surprise was a lot of the staff and faculty weren't even aware that we had a policy. And then when they read it, they realized how vague it was and how much was still left in their corner to figure out. They read that as, okay, so this is the law, but what am I supposed to do with this information? I think a lot of the faculty realized they didn't know the difference between a service animal and maybe a therapy animal. Rowan is very lucky. We have the Schreiber therapy animals on campus, and we see them often. But honestly, they really started to, the more they dove into the policy, the more they were like, I actually don't know the difference between a therapy animal, an emotional support animal, and a service animal. I've even had somebody that was like, oh, somebody brought their service snake to class before. And I had to explain to them that here in the United States, generally only, miniature horses or dogs are acceptable. I know in some states, cats can be counted, not sure which states, but I really had to kind of move the conversation back to, first and foremost, what is a service animal? What is federal law? And then let's walk through what the Higher Education Institute supplied to us for policy. So it was a little frustrating because as smart as these individuals are, and they really were like, I want to push for equity and inclusion. And despite how many of them were like, oh, we've took so many seminars and, professional development, they were so behind on something that I thought was, pretty common knowledge. So it was quite an experience.
I can definitely feel for that because I think everybody with a service dog has had so many experiences with somebody that they think is very smart or intellectual, and we don't realize that they don't know as much as we think they do. I always say that they see a dog and their mind goes blank because they get so excited to see the dog that it's like all of our trains of thought vanish. So it's interesting to see that from a policy's perspective, is like you said, that they don't really think further on the policies because it's almost like they feel like a contractual, kind of just skim it and go, I see that, So it's interesting to see how we have to like face this instead of passive action. They have to think more of like inaction.
Yeah. And it, like I said, it was very interesting. Of a lot of them had stories of, again, seeing somebody with a service animal, but then also realizing that they didn't think of all the ideas and assumptions and preconceived notions behind it. I think a lot of them did a lot of inner work of trying to figure out what disability looked like to them. And it kind of made them realize that it's, I have an invisible disability. And I would question them, when you see me on campus, because many of them have seen me without my service dog as well, or have known me before. And I said, when I use the word disabled, do you picture, someone that looks like me? A lot of them know that, I was a dancer in undergrad. That was my major. They know I used to coach gymnastics. I was a gymnast for a really long time. So for them, I think all of a sudden when I use disabled and, all of a sudden they're like, well, what does she have this dog for? It kind of destroys everything that they think they know about something. So it was interesting to watch that process as well, for somebody to kind of understand that they still have a lot to learn about something. And that's saying something for, I think, a lot of the PhDs, because they thrive off of information. They embody it. They do. But I think it also teaches them that despite being done with their studies, they're still continuous learners as well.
So I know you mentioned it a bit in your book, and I have my book here all annotated and everything, but what led you to educational research? What about it drew you in?
I think the thought that I still had so much to learn and this was my opportunity to do so. A lot of people were like, well, why would you pick something that you don't really know much about? I think everybody thinks that the dissertation process is more of like you just coming up with stuff that you already know. But I really wanted to have something factual behind the research. I didn't want it to be pure assumption, because I know we have lived experiences behind it, but to have both qualitative and quantitative data behind it really supports it in an ethical way, in an educational way. I think by doing the research too, it allowed me to open up more spaces. Like I was able to meet you on LinkedIn, and I came across Joey Ramp, and I've met so many others through this that I've learned like my work is just such a small drop in the bucket that I hope can continue to grow. I also saw that through my research, and especially through some of my like preliminary studies, that there is not a lot of information out there for this topic. At first I thought it wasn't very relevant, like who cares? And then I realized that's the joy of education, is letting people know that this is an important matter, whether it affects one person or 20 people. So I'm really starting to learn that while it might not be something that will affect everybody, maybe not everybody will have a service dog, but like disability is something that if you live long enough, most of us will, end up becoming disabled in some sort of fashion. So yeah, I think that's really what it came down to. While I understand my topic might be very niche, it still expands to the point of we can't just stop where we are, which I think, people are like, I know service animals exist, but I don't usually see them in education because of A, B, and C. I need us to think, when I see them in education, what is my general reaction? What is my responsibility? How can I make this accessible to everybody if they happen to have that accommodation or need? So I think that's kind of why I kind of continued this. I did start off with like neurodiverse students. That's actually another one of my go-to things that I love researching, because I think neurodiversity is kind of like a new concept where it kind of expands past autism, because autism research is big. But when you broaden it to neurodiversity and it comes down to the way people think, I think we get a little bit more traffic when it comes to that. So it's interesting how I started off on my first year being like, I'm going to do neurodiverse students, which for some that is their disability. And then somehow I made it to service animals. It was quite a journey.
Interesting thing that there's always that intersectionality too, that there could be somebody who's neurodiverse and has a service dog. And also, jumping off of how you said that little research for service dogs in general, it's also interesting how research that is out there, it's inherently inaccessible because it's behind like a massive paywall. I remember I was looking for a few research articles on a specific topic on service dogs just because I was interested in it. And it was like $200 if you want to access the chapter. And I said, for a lot of people, that's inaccessible. So especially if somebody is going to a university or a college that doesn't have like a good idea of service dogs and they want to put together like maybe a proposal or something with research behind it, they can't access that research in order to do so. So I definitely agree with you that, you know, your research is very important. And I know even if it doesn't look like it now, down the road, somebody is going to need to read your research, need to see your research, because it's going to help build on that body of knowledge. And just as you mentioned, neurodiversity and autism specifically has a lot of research, but as the years go by, we learn new and new things every day. I mean, there was in my past talks I gave the example of the false belief that autism only occurred in boys, and then as they did more research, they begin to see that wasn't as true. So that's always needed to do in these fields, regardless of how many people research it, because down the road, we're going to see how things change with each new paper and each new research study.
Yes, I'm glad that you mentioned the paywall too, because yeah, that was something I ran up against of do I want to pay the $200? And I think that's another reason why I put out my book so early, because honestly, it was supposed to wait until after I was done my research, but through this process, I didn't realize that my dissertation will be under embargo for quite a couple of years. So my book is kind of like a peek, and I think it's a way for people to reach out. I'm willing to provide individuals, you know, my dissertation previously before it comes out on anything, because I didn't know it takes that long. But I'm hoping to put out a couple more articles and books and things. And until that's released, I don't think people I didn't understand the process for things to be published. It upsets me that there's knowledge out there that a lot of us can't obtain due to timeline, due to embargo, due to paywalls, due to who knows what else. You know, the government is quite an interesting time right now. So I've actually heard of conferences, people being turned away for some of their research not being accepted and things like that. So we have to continue to try different avenues to try to continue to connect with individuals to get them this information.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. As scientists, I know some scientists are like, oh, I'll let somebody else do the talking, but I always firmly believe that even if you're not good at it, you always have to try to learn how to communicate your research, because it makes such an impact more than we know. I agree that, you know, we should try our best to share our research, share what we know with others whenever we can.
Definitely. I agree. I'm not numbers make me nervous. My findings chapter was probably my worst enemy as somebody in I'm more social science oriented, but I understand the purpose of a lot of that, you know, quantitative information. But it's true. Like, in order to get the audience that you need, sometimes you do need to dive a little bit more into the academic, scholarly, because I always tell people I'm not a scholarly writer. If you probably would check my writing, I think just me being kind to myself, I probably write at a 7th grade level. So it was really interesting to do a type of dissertation that allowed me to be more like layman's terms as well. So there are really scholarly portions to it. And then there are a lot of portions that are for the everyday person. So I think that allows some sort of a better reach, or I'm hoping, because as many people say, like, a good dissertation is a done dissertation. I'm hoping that mine doesn't turn into a dusty dissertation. I think a lot of us joke and we're like, nobody's ever going to read this. But I pray that someone will skim it, or at least, cite it or reference it at some point when it finally does become published.
Well, I'll be sure to be reading it once it's published. Moving on to the next question. So this question came from a bit of my experience as well, but as somebody who had to do a lot of training with my service dog as well, I want to say privileged enough to be able to have a trainer, but I had to do a lot of the training on my own as well. It's like homework and consistently do it. So I feel like there's a learning curve for both handler and service dog. And would you say that your experience with that helped shape your understanding of education or your research? And what are a few things that you personally learned from that experience?
Yes, that is a great question, because as somebody who I have been very lucky that as a, higher educational professional, I have seen quite a few service dogs. And sometimes people are under the impression that these dogs are robots and they're always perfect. Well, I was very lucky where I had an individual about 3 years ago that had a seeing eye dog that's from Seeing Eye. It kind of showed me that the dog still has a personality. The dog is still a dog. I think we always thought, like, they're not afraid of anything. They don't say hi to people. They don't bark. I need people to, like, move away from that idea, because these dogs, while they're trained impeccably, not all of us were able to get a dog from, one of those facilities, because one, the time, the money,
Yes.
the amount of wait list. So I'm somebody who actually ended up purchasing a dog, working with a trainer, which he was more police canine than service dog trainer. So it was a lot of teaching them what I required as well. And then a lot of doing research for myself. And one thing I learned too is, like, breed really does matter. And I think bond really does matter, because despite the fact that Lily does really well, she started service work very young. She's actually taken a little break right now because she kind of hit like the I don't want to say terrible twos, but German Shepherds they're really into your emotions, and your emotions truly do travel down the leash.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
think because I was so nervous and anxious, and just like, what if she messes up? What if she does this? That, to the point where it's like, now, like, when we see other dogs, I'm worried about that interaction, and it's now affected her to be kind of leash reactive. So I've learned to kind of like take a step back, realize that she's still learning and growing, and that we actually cannot train for everything. Like, again, people think she's perfectly solid, but it's like graduation. All of a sudden we had flares go off. Well, I think it
Oh,
scared the
wow.
whole front row, including my service dog, but she recovered well.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that I am now learning what it takes. I'm also learning that, different dogs will be suitable for different people. Like, for example, like, there's a lot of shelter to service, and some people are like, no, those dogs could never be suitable for service work. And I'm like, again, it depends on what kind. So I really need people to stop making statements about, like, owner training. And then you have the vets. The vets like to enter the scene, where they sometimes have their own method of madness for training as well. And I think sometimes the lack of standards, it upsets people. So I'm really trying to learn to be very cognizant of how I frame some of our training. I really lean heavily on the fact that I've paid for a professional trainer. I try not to let it known really that my dog is owner trained, because then they think it's like I don't know, she lacks in some ways. But I also see her, like, her learning, her growing. I think we're both growing together, because we've definitely have made it through moments of, I don't know, like I wasn't sure, like graduation, like that's a lot of people, and you know, everybody was just so excited to see her. And then like our president decided to hood her, and she is a dog that really like takes her job seriously. So like Hushman, our president, tried to touch her, and she was like, you know, no. But it's like he didn't know. So it's kind of like, now I know that that's something I might have to communicate, that when she has her vest on, she's very serious, vest off. She can be friendlier to certain people, but she's not like my labs or, you know, some of the other service dogs on campus. So I think people also need to like not confuse them again with like pet therapy. Like they honestly think just because she's capable of tasking, that she's also capable of being friendly. And I'm like, she's not really super friendly either. I think she enjoys people a little differently than people expect from a service dog. You know, they see a lot of the puppy raisers and things on campus. That used to be a pretty big thing. But no, I think training is something that's continuous, which I don't think people realize.
Yes.
My other student that I had on campus, 4 dogs from the Seeing Eye before he finally settled on this last one. So it even proves that just because they come from an organization doesn't necessarily mean they're perfect, because you can't really train for life. And I think people really just need to realize that it's like us, we're humans, and we've been here for like over 20 plus years, but we still have a lot to learn. So like, please allow this dog or miniature horse to learn and maybe make mistakes, or, you know, they have accidents too. They have bad days too. So I think I've learned a lot about that as well, and it's okay. And I'm still allowed to take up space, and I don't always have to be so apologetic for it either.
You said about the terrible twos. I remember when my service dog Canelo went through the terrible twos. I remember that was, I think, I want to say lowest point with having a service dog, because every day I would go to school and be like, you know, what if I'm a fraud? Like, you know, she's not doing things right, and like, what if she never gets it? And you know, I was like, I had such anxiety during that year, because it's so hard to explain to somebody who didn't experience it themselves. You know, it's just, if they're growing up, they want to test the boundaries, as I like to call it. I remember Canella would, like, she knows how to do things, but when we were in training, I was training her on like what to do, worst case scenario if I faint or something like that. And she would know what to do, but then she'd look at me and be like, I know this isn't real. And she wouldn't do it. And I remember the trainer said, well, you know, we'll see if thing does happen, then that's going to be like a moment where you see if she did retain or didn't. And when things came down to it, she did know how to do her tasks, but it's just such a hard transition period.
You're right. I think, again, people expect so much out of these dogs and still don't realize they're still learning. I've learned that German Shepherds are really stubborn, especially female ones. So I kind of like set myself up for failure thinking to get a girl dog. Meanwhile, my male dogs look at me like the sun rises and sets, and, you know, but like Lily, I could like, without her vest on at home, if I tell her come here, so look at me, roll her eyes and walk off. And I'm like, did that really just happen? So I'm glad that you talk about that as well, because again, like, some of her accidents, I really took it, I don't know, to heart. Or like when she barked at people, or she's very protective of, like, a couple of my colleagues were pregnant last year, and she would not let anybody buy them. And it's like, you know, it's still natural instinct for a dog to protect. Do I think she would ever bite? No, but she has a really deep kind of crazy bark. But she's also afraid of chihuahuas. So it's like, you know, I get it. It's hard, and we're working through it. And I think, I don't know if you frequent social media like Facebook groups and stuff, but I think a lot of people are retiring their dogs too early versus trying to work through it. And
Yeah.
sometimes that discouragement can make it, again, really hard for people to get the help that they need. And I think that's why owner training is so hard, because we care so much about how we affect the community. And I think the imposter syndrome's there, and working through the terrible twos or their fear stage. And I don't think people realize how much we have to do in order to work with this animal, and still navigate our disability and the day to day. They're like, oh, it's so cool, you get to walk around and bring your dog. And I'm like, listen, if I had to bring my dog, I'd probably bring one of my other ones. Like, so, but she's the one. So I'm glad to hear it's not a solely me being anxious issue.
I feel like also because you and I are both in a like higher level of professionalism, I want to say maybe like that higher professionalism environment. Like I think we also feel okay, we have to be perfect. We want to show ourselves off as professional. We know what to do, and then when our service dogs make a small mistake, we're like the world's crumbling down. Because I feel that all the time as well.
Yeah, you're right. It's hard for me to like in my position. I was both staff and student, and when I first started bringing Lily to get familiar with campus, she was still very puppy-like and still learning. I remember I would be doing some lectures or some workshops, and she'd be tearing like my jacket up, and I'm like, I am so sorry. Or when she was little, she used to snore, so she would fall asleep and snore. The puppy food gave her gas, and I'm like, oh my gosh, guys, like, I'm so sorry. And it just felt like it was very unprofessional. So you're right. It's just, we feel like we're at that part. But then I also realized how accommodating people were. Like, even now when she barks, like, my colleagues are like, hey, she's just protecting you. And I'm like, I want to make this very clear. That is not her job here. They cannot be protection dogs. Do not encourage it. But like, they will always be like, well, good job. Like, and I'm like, don't tell her that. But they will defend her till the end of time. But I was like, I still feel like it's a big issue. So you're right. Being in that higher graduate level makes us feel like we have more eyes on us.
Moving on to the next question. So, part of the difficulty of having a service dog is having those invisible disabilities suddenly becoming visible to others. And I know you mentioned this in your book as well. So, would you say having Lily-Rue has helped you feel more comfortable asking for accommodations, or would you say that now you're, or did it do the opposite, that you feel a little hesitant to ask because you have a service dog and it's making it visible?
Yes. So this is a question that requires a lot of duality. So you're about to witness probably me processing this in full time. As a student, I think the process was wonderful. I loved having her. She made me feel validated. The disabilities office really welcomed the fact that, between my first year and my third year, a lot changed. And they were willing to walk me through that change. But as an employee and as somebody who is now trying to navigate interviews, I have gone from bringing Lily with me to interviews to now I feel like it is best to not bring her. Because I feel like until I pass through the interviewing process, and now I'm even thinking, if I get a new job, will I wait the 90 days prior to bringing her? Just because I still feel like, unfortunately, even though we have laws and everything that protect us, it's not
Exactly.
necessarily true. It's sad because about 2 weeks ago, I actually took the photo down of Lily-Rue and I in my LinkedIn. I am aware that if people Google me, the first thing that will come up is this dog and I. I also am kind of hoping that their lack of understanding of service dogs might just lead them to assume that maybe I'm a puppy raiser. A lot of people think that. I'm having a difficult time navigating interviews because I remember when I first graduated with my master's in 2021, at the time, a service dog wasn't even a thought. I didn't consider myself disabled. I knew something was off, but at the time I didn't know what I needed. So now it's like, now that I'm back into the interviewing stage, I have to learn how to navigate this completely all over again. So a lot of times, even when I work with a lot of students with disabilities, their question is, do we openly admit that we require accommodations or have disabilities? I usually say that's a talk that you're going to have to maybe walk yourself through, because there's just so many layers. It's not a simple yes or no. It depends what your disability is. It depends the organization. There's a lot that goes into it. But I'm sad to say, as much as I want to be an advocate for disability loud and proud, since I've been interviewing probably since November of 2024 at this point, I have decided that it might be in my best interest to not continue to bring Lily-Rue with me to interviews. And then if I do get hired, that accommodation will be asked for possibly after the 90 days probation, which I've never really had to work without her for that long. So it might be an interesting time, but I'm trying to be strategic about it. It's hard because you got to pick, do I pay my bills or do
It's very difficult.
Yeah, it's interesting because, again, I'm somebody who, it appears like I am very high functioning anxiety. I mask it very well. People are like, you always seem like you love to talk and stuff. And I'm like, because it's been a lot of work and my medication does its job. But, it doesn't mean that it still doesn't appear from time to time. So I'm trying to do things that, one, keeps me employed, and two, kind of keeps I don't know, it's hard because I also, as a past career counselor, I'm all about bringing your authentic self to the job, but this might not be the employment climate to do that. So you have to choose, your choices wisely. So at this point, I've decided to not disclose that I have a disability until maybe things are a little bit more stable right now, which is pretty sad. Pretty sad. I feel like I'm going in the opposite direction of what I'm advocating for, but sometimes you have to do what's best, for yourself.
Yeah, and I completely understand it too, because it's when I think about what's going to happen when I hopefully graduate as well, I think the job market is like this giant monster, and it just gets harder and harder every day as it currently is. And I remember when I was going around interviewing for the PhD program, and I was going to different places trying to talk to potential advisors, seeing what the program could offer. I was at this point where I was like, okay, do I bring my service dog or do I not to these interviews? And I decided to bring her because since I work in the lab quite a lot, I felt like, okay, I need to gauge this situation now rather than I join and then it's toxic work environment. And honestly, that process kind of broke my heart quite a lot because I had people telling me that I should just not go to graduate school. I had people telling me that you should just give up here. And when it hurt quite a lot in the moment. But after the fact, I was saying to myself, I think sometimes having a service dog, we see the worst in people that other people don't see. Because, for example, a lot of these people I was talking to, they were people who others would praise and be like, oh, they're so nice, everybody loves them. And then when you see their reaction to you having a disability, and even to them, sometimes they don't realize okay, having a service dog means they have a disability. Sometimes they just think, oh, they have a dog, and you get to see that reaction in real time. And sometimes I try to think of it it hurts in the moment, but then it's like a blessing in disguise because I'm not waiting with bated breath to see, okay, is this going to be an issue later on or is it an issue now? So I completely understand your position as well because it's tough. There's no real right answer because nobody has the right answer, and it's so difficult because, like you said, there's laws in place, but we don't know for sure if they're going to adhere to that. And then, they could always say, oh, we selected somebody else, and then not say
Yes.
the reason. And that's the toughest part as well. So I completely understand your position. I think it's a tough choice.
Yeah, it is. Like, I walked into one of our community colleges to do an interview, and as soon as the vice, dean, or I forget her title, but she was deathly afraid. And from the moment she told me that, I knew this interview was done. It was done. So it's like little things like that. I also, people are like, but you're a therapist, you also could work fully remote from home. And I said, I'm not ready to give up yet. I think that's my thing. I've done a lot, but I still feel like I need to accomplish a little bit more in higher ed before I kind of give in and do what's best for me. Would I love to just work at home and not have to worry about all that? Yes, but I still feel like I have still a little bit of advocacy left in me before I concede. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to navigate higher ed, which I'm interested in maybe producing another book about my experience after grad, because again, the school really thrived on publishing me everywhere, and I was on the videos and stuff, but I feel like higher ed really isn't that inclusive. And the same for the world of work. So I still feel like there's a lot of work to be done, because despite all that fanfare, I'm out of a job and I'm interviewing other places that might continue that because they're not ready to take someone that just requires something a little different. So I think that's why I'm really pushing for it. Because again, my mom's like, why don't you just stay home and be a therapist? Which I love, I do. But I think I don't like somebody telling me when it's my time to go. So I'm very lucky I will still be at my current university as an adjunct right now. But I'm really pushing to get back into some kind of professional service, so I can continue to show students that, they're indeed welcome here. And I think by having staff that, require different accommodations, we can continue that. So yeah, it's a terrible moment where you're like, do I set myself up for success knowing it will fail later? Or do I do what makes everybody comfortable, but then realize it might be an issue in the future? It's a hard decision. I always tell people case by case. And that's kind of what I'm fighting for too. So instead of getting the standard no, be like, okay, we'll figure this out. We've sent people and animals to space centuries ago, but we can't figure out how a service animal can still task and help their owner while in a lab. To me, that that doesn't make sense. Hope that you continue to push the boundaries as much as you can. And then, keep in mind that no one expects you to carry that task alone by yourself either. So if you have to make the decision to do what's best for you, I hope you know that nobody is upset for you for making the decision that's best works for you.
Really do hope that you get to write another book on the subject, because I feel like, just like you said, we don't have to do it alone. And also just seeing your feelings in the book as well really made me feel validated as well in my feelings. And it's almost like that roadmap, because you have graduated, and I just about finished my first year in my PhD program. So it's kind of like being at the bottom of the hill looking up, and you're trying to see the footsteps of the person before you. And so I think it's just so important to write our experiences down and talk about our experiences, because there are people who don't feel comfortable doing so or feel like they can't. And just like I said, I hope that you get to write that book. I hope one day I'll be able to write a book myself about the subject, but I also want to get that life experience and learn more about what I can do and things like that as well. So that's why I'm also so excited to have been able to interview you on this subject too.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, again, thank you for having me. I didn't think it would. At one point I was like, is this important? But when the opportunity presented itself, I was excited, because again, as a counselor, I hear a lot of these stories, and I wish more people knew that their experience matters. I can't wait for the day where it's like I'm teaching a class and I'll be like, oh my gosh, this person who interviewed me, like she has a book too. And it's like your experience matters as well, because there's going to be many that follow behind you. And I don't think people realize that we just aren't like one and done people. And I need more people to realize that. I actually have a couple with a young son in Canada, and he is going into 8th grade next year, and they're still fighting to have this dog be allowed with him. He has cerebral palsy. And for some reason, there's no information about it. So they provided the school with my book. And I'm like, you can't be serious. Like dogs have been going to K through 12 schools for a while now, but for some reason, each and every district doesn't use the information that they have, or they don't research. So I think that's another reason to, please be a writer, because people in real time, they need it. Like, I did not think that this book would leave. I don't know. I just wrote it. And now I'm like really determined that I might have to even, write maybe something for the K through 12, because for some reason, nobody can create something of their own. So yes, I encourage you, even if you don't think it's, because again, I wrote that book at the same time I was supposed to be writing my dissertation. Gotta love ADHD. I have terrible task paralysis. So I decided to do everything except write my chapters. So somehow the book, do I wish I spent a little bit more time? Yes. So I think that's another reason why I want a second go, because I think I'm a little bit more aware of what I went through now that especially that I'm kind of out of it now and I'm at the finish line. But no,
Yeah.
I encourage you to, start a Word doc, throw some things in there. It doesn't even have to make sense. I think we need more stories like myself and like Joey Ramps, and many others. And then we can start a collection, and then we could fully have a full disability, studies set going on, that could really help. And I just don't think people realize how much their personal testimony and experiences are meaningful to the disabled, the non-disabled, the people who are open and ready to learn, to higher education, to K through 12, different countries.
Yeah.
LinkedIn allowed me to see, like, they're starting a thing with service dogs in India. I thought that was amazing. So yeah, anything that you can contribute would be, I can't wait for the day.
When you mentioned service dogs abroad as well, I remember I had like the great privilege of going to South Korea for like a chemistry elective, and it
Yes.
was like a chemistry, like science in South Korea, or like STEM in South Korea trip,
Yes.
and that was just an amazing experience. I was able to go because I was able to get a scholarship for it. And I remembered when I was there, on top of like thinking of all the science going on in the cities and things like that, I was also thinking to myself, like, what is the accessibility like? And it was really interesting because, like, South Korea, especially, they were both very accessible and also very inaccessible, where they always focus on accessibility toward the elderly. So they would have like special seating. They would have like tactile floors. They would have people to help them, things like that. They would have automatic doors. But then when it came to service dogs, I noticed that there were many, many signs posted saying only guide dogs allowed. And I remembered being a little shocked, like, oh, like I can see that it makes sense to them. But at the same time, I was thinking, like, wow, that's like a huge barrier to a lot of people who may benefit from having, for example, a medical alert service dog. So I always think it's interesting to see how the future may play out. Maybe, like you said, India is adopting the practice of having service dogs, and maybe in the future, maybe other countries will follow suit as well. So
that would be exciting to see in our time. I know these things take time and we're not top priority, but I think you just put something on the map for me to like look into that I don't even think I knew. Cause like we're always thinking about like, what is our next thing of research? And it might be good for my mental health too, to do something a little bit more outside myself than up close and personal. So no, yeah, you're right. That's something that we have to worry about as individuals who travel, and the rules are different everywhere, but something so little as just changing the word guide dog to, service animal could be world changing. And shoot, we have those problems in the States. I think sometimes I think
Yes.
like one of my things is I want to be able to have a sticker like I think I came up with this idea maybe like my second year of my EDD of I just wanted in my general area every place to say like no animals except for like service animals, because you would think every business would have that, but they don't. So maybe like revamping some of those projects and realizing that sometimes you don't always have to move mountains to make change, and I think we need to remember that. So like even though our biggest reach is South Korea and we're new and we're far in there, maybe just telling one people that like guide dogs isn't really the term anymore could start a revolution.
Yeah. I think that would be a really interesting avenue of research too, just like research on, how service dogs are treated around the world too, because you don't really see that often, and especially something that always stood out to me as well about the whole guide dog thing was that South Korea is very highly advanced in medicine and their medicinal practices. So to me, it was a little bit mind-boggling that they don't consider service dogs. So I know it's probably partially like due to the culture or like maybe how they teach medicine as well. Like they think more about the technical side rather than the living with like a disability side. But it's just really interesting to see how different places around the world, treat disability or think about disability as well.
Yeah, it is. I think it grounds you sometimes that this isn't only a American problem. And I think by thinking about it globally too, kind of helped me get through this dissertation. Because again, a lot of times our professors would be like, why does this matter? And then like, I guess again, as somebody who comes from a counseling background and I'm really into my feelings, sometimes my why doesn't seem so important, but when you kind of put it in that perspective of this is something that affects people globally, you're like, oh, this is really something that is important and has a lot of reach and is continuous and always growing, that it doesn't have to stop here even after you finish your studies.
So moving on to, I guess, lighter questions. Where did the name Lily-Rue come from? And does it have any special meaning or you just like the name?
So I had a grandmother that lived with me all my life, and her name was Lillian, and she lived until she was 97 years old. I was very lucky. She got to live with me until I was 29 years old. So instead of like, I really do call her Lillian at home, or like when she gets in trouble, I'll call her Lillian. But I don't know, there was something about Lily that I liked. And then I really liked the character Rue from the Hunger Games. So that's something that kind of stuck with me. And like, for some reason, I was just like, oh, her name will be Lily-Rue. And it was funny because I don't know, I didn't know I would be saying it as much. Sometimes I'm like, man, maybe I should have named her something else. Um, because all my dogs have very interesting names. I have a Shetland sheepdog who's 14 and her name is Aria. It's like she kind of howls and it makes kind of like a aria. I have two black labs, Santos and Matisse. They're both 7. We got litter mates. I know you're not really supposed to get litter mates, but that's just something I did when I was uneducated. Then I decided to try, pet therapy at one point, and I adopted a little mixed dog, and her name is Reina. So that's, queen in Spanish. So I really like that. And then, Lily-Rue came around, and then I adopted another German Shepherd, a boy. His name was Bagel originally, but I renamed him Bear. It's not as fancy as the other ones, but I didn't really want to switch his name to anything that was like so different. But I don't know, for some reason, like I didn't want to call her Lillian because I felt like that was too serious. And I just thought, I don't know, Lily-Rue, because all my dogs do have middle names as well. So it's just a little bit of meaning. a little bit of fun, a little bit of, I think she does have the personality of my grandma. She's very stubborn. So
Speaking of grandmothers, my grandmother actually, she lives with us as well, and I grew up with her too. She just turned 90.
oh, God bless her. See, that's what I said.
Thank
It keeps
you.
them alive for a really long time. It
Oh,
does. It's like,
yes.
yeah, she's like the second mom to me. So yeah, I was very lucky to have her, that long in my life. So I kind of wanted to pay like homage to that.
I think it's a beautiful name. I think it really works.
Yeah, everybody's like, where did you get that from? And I'm like, listen, I promise if I ever have kids, I'll properly think through. This is not a reflection of like how I will name my children. So yeah.
So, aside from receiving your degree, is there anything that you accomplished or did during your degree that you're really proud of and want to share?
So besides writing my book, I'd like to share the fact that I still was a, part-time therapist during this time. I
Mhm.
work exclusively with individuals with disabilities as well as like LGBTQIA plus. And I work with college students. I think a lot of us were told that something has to give during this time, but I just wasn't ready to stop who I am outside of higher ed. I know as somebody with a chronic illness, it's not really wise to continue to pile on so many things, but I think it helped me really remember that I am not just doing this for myself. I'm doing this for others to prove that we could do this. So I'm really proud that I managed to power through and do everything that I wanted and more. And I'm also like proud of the fact that I now know that like this is the time where I rest. I think a lot of people are like, okay, like what's next? And I don't really have an answer for them. And that's weird for me because, like I said, I'm somebody that, I work full time. I work 2 part-times. I was also teaching 2 classes at the time. I was doing a dissertation. I also judge gymnastics occasionally. And people are like, so when do you like sleep? And I'm like, I don't. So now I'm trying really hard to like practice what I preach and really rest and enjoy the fruits of my labor of being finished.
I want to share something that, like a quote that really stuck out to me when I was at Rollins. We had a guest speaker come, and this quote just always stuck with me, and I feel like it always really shows who we are as people. The guest speaker, I forgot their name unfortunately, said that when we feel like there's something against us, we become overachievers because we want to have that checklist of, yeah, I have this against me, but I do this and this and this and this, and we try to pile things on to ourselves, pile things on, and we don't realize how heavy that weight is, but we feel like it's so important to us as well. So I really truly understand that feeling that you're talking about as well, that, we want to do more, prove ourselves. And at the same time, it's difficult to sit and rest, that we feel like we have to deserve the rest as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so I completely understand that. And I hope that you do have like an amazing rest and get to take the time to really sit in your accomplishment as well.
I hope so too, because it's like, it's funny because I keep telling my clients, like, you don't have to earn rest. And then I feel like a hypocrite. Like I'm really good at preaching wellness and health, but I realized I don't follow my own direction. So I'm really trying to practice what I preach. I admit that it's really hard for me. I'm also a little, I don't know how to put it, but like despite everything on LinkedIn and the awards that I've gotten, I'm still kind of in denial. Like when I went to my first interview and somebody called me like Dr. Allison Gainer, I literally was like, who's that? So I think I'm still going through like I finished, I did it. It's going to take a while because I feel like no matter what I accomplish in life, it's not really going to change the person I am. I still feel like I have a lot of work to do. I can't even tell you what that work is, because a lot of times, like, my psychiatrist will ask, like, how much more do you want to do? Or like, when will you feel accomplished? And I said, I think that's something I really have to sit and think about and do the work. Because to throw it really far back, I was somebody that did not get into college walking off the, high school graduation field. It wasn't because I wasn't good enough. It's because I filled out all the applications incorrectly. I didn't know that as a first generation student. It was back in the time where you had to send in everything via like paperwork. And your school counselor was supposed to check it. And me as an incoming college student, my parents didn't go to college. Well, my dad did for a while, but like basketball, and he didn't really last long. He didn't finish. So years later, when it was my turn, I didn't really know how to navigate it. And I turned in all of my applications for a doctor of physical therapy program. Yeah, you can't do that as an incoming freshman, but nobody really told me why I was denied. They just kind of was like, you didn't get in. So I ended up going to community college, and it took me about 6 years, I think, to like get myself together and be like, school is for me and what I want to do and figuring myself out. Scary to like walk across that graduation field and hear, Dr. Allison Gainer, when I'm still trying to recover from that girl who didn't have anywhere to go to college in the fall when all my friends decided to go off to college. So this has been a long time coming. I think I'm still trying to figure out who I am with all these new accolades. Yeah, it's a weird journey. I never thought like it's aging me saying 20 years from now, but yeah, 20 years ago, I didn't think that I would be here. Didn't think I would be able to do it. So yeah, it's interesting to think about those thoughts in real time.
So finally, how did you celebrate your graduation or going to celebrate your graduation?
That is a good question. I haven't really taken the time to celebrate yet. I think I'm trying to figure out how to do that for myself. I think right now, my version of celebrating is I'm trying to look into roles that fully help me feel like I am serving my purpose. I think in the past, I used to look for roles simply due to the title versus the fit. I always thought I had to be somebody important. But I'm really starting to learn that now that I'm entering into, this is scary to say, but now that I'm in my late 30s, which it's hard to say, I think I'm realizing how important it is to find yourself in spaces where you feel that sense of belonging, where you feel supported. We can no longer just work for money and go home and think we're going to be okay. We generally have to think about our well-being in these processes. So I'm really trying to take it slow, make decisions that aren't always decisions out of, I guess, like fight or flight or like survival mode. I'm truly trying to create a future that I can look back on and say, like, I didn't let, I don't know, what society thinks work wins. I want to maybe in the future open a counseling practice once I become fully licensed. I'm thinking about that. Thinking about trying to get more involved in the world of gymnastics. I think I left that behind because I was a coach for like 10 years before I decided to return back to school. I would like to either coach again or go more into judging. So it's like I still like to continue things outside of like my doctorate and my education. I just don't want those to like disappear. I feel like a lot of us are losing our whimsy and things we used to dream about when we were younger. And I'm really hoping to hold on to that. So I think I'm celebrating by, maybe going back to some of the hobbies, or, I finally decided to pick up a book and read for pleasure. I don't think people understand that after you've been reading for academic purposes for so long, it can be a little hard to just sit down and read just for fun. I want to get that back. I want to get that feeling back. And then I just want to have maybe the feeling of less urgency too. So I think I want to celebrate by just not everything needs to be solved in a day, just taking things slowly, allowing things to happen as they should. I don't know. I think I'm just finally embodying the grown up Allison. I think I know, like, I've been a grown up for a long time, but I think I'm finally feeling secure, safe. I feel like I've developed an identity that I feel proud of. And for some reason, a lot of people are still missing that because we're still searching for that. I don't know, like we're still out there people pleasing and doing things for others. A lot of times people are like, why did you even decide to go back to college? And I was like, I don't know, maybe for my mom, maybe for me, maybe for the students who weren't able to. So yeah, I kind of want to take a breath from all that weight of others and just enjoy.
I truly hope that you get to enjoy everything that you get to do. I feel like I also say a lot that when you're so focused on research, I feel like you might lose pieces of yourself in the process because you feel so absorbed into what you're doing. So it's always good to take those moments to step back and remember who you are and what you like to do. So I really hope you get to absorb everything that you want to now. I guess that's the end of the interview. So I just want to ask you, do you have any special messages that you want to share? It could be a thank you to anybody who has supported you, or maybe a certain organization that you want to highlight, anything like that.
I mean, I would just like to thank my, family, friends, mentors, dissertation group, everybody that's followed me through this journey, yourself included. Again, I think I started this thinking that it wouldn't matter, it's just another dissertation, it's just another paper, like we all have to do it. But I think I found a community and others all across the United States that I can really reach out to and continue to develop this thought, or even if it's not on me, I'm hoping I'm inspiring others. Because, I think a lot of us say like, oh, this was hard. But I really need people to understand, like, this wasn't a journey only for myself. Like, I really hope that this will prove to others that they can do it. On top of, being chronically ill, like I was also lately diagnosed with, anxiety and ADHD. So it's been quite an academic journey. I used to have a teacher in high school that just didn't think I was really smart. So this is also kind of like a testament of like, don't listen to the people who don't believe in you, kind of moment. And I know that sounds kind of corny, but like, I don't know, like he didn't get a doctorate, but I did. So it's like, I feel like this journey was for more than just myself. And I'd also like to thank you for, taking the time to interview me. I think it's a good day when somebody really takes me through an interview that really gets me thinking. I think I admitted a lot of things out loud today that I haven't really had a chance to vocalize. So I thank you for that opportunity, because, as a therapist, I like to do the inner work too. So it's not often that people really take the time to ask me questions and allow me to process a lot of those things in real time. So thank you.
Thank you so much for making the time to be here. I really, really appreciate it. And for being my first official interview as well. Thank you so much. I loved your answers and I loved getting to talk through these things with you as well. Somebody who also has a service dog too. So thank you.
Yes, of course. I'd love to do this. This was exciting. I love this.